Hi, let's begin with a hypothetical. Let's say that you have, I don't know, let's say a younger cis guy. Let's say that this guy is, I don't know, maybe around early 20s or so, early to mid 20s. Maybe he's in college. Um, Not sure if that's a determinant factor, but let's say that we have a young guy who's kind of hip with culture, but generally politically leans more moderate, centrist, or that's how they identify, right? They come from a decently privileged background. They haven't had to worry too much about many issues throughout life. They've seen politics as more sports than actual politics. Let's say that's the person we're working with. And let's say that one day they go onto YouTube. All right. And let's say that this is the kind of person who regularly browses the trending tab, right? And let's say that one day they see a video on there. And without saying what the title is, let's say that they see it's a reaction video. And let's say that they're seeing that it's getting a lot of traction. Let's say that they click on it, and what they see, roughly, is a person who is very politically charged, to say the least. And what they are doing is it's them in like a bottom left corner of the screen or so, or something like that, right? Where they are going frame by frame through another person's video. And every time that person, the other video that they're watching, every time they want to stop it, they'll stop that video and they will critique it, right? Usually relying just off of whatever knowledge they have off the top of their head. Maybe they have some experience in that area and they cite an article off the top of their head. Maybe they have a list of resources. But generally, that is the feel of the video. Question. Is the person who they were watching the person who was doing the critique far right or far left? So this is sort of why I want to talk, right? I titled this as an open letter to BreadTube because this is just something I'm sort of noticing right now. There are a lot of people who I follow, not necessarily just on, like BreadTube sort of channels, but, like a lot of very left-leaning commentators and content creators. I want to say this up front, that this is not me, like, trying to be deconstructive in the slightest. But what I want to do, what the hope of this video is, for as small as my audience is, to be able to hopefully start a little more conversation. This is actually an interesting thing for me to talk about because part of this has to come from me being a smaller creator, right? For those of you who don't know, my name is Riley Grace. I'm a law student, I'm trans, and I'm just sort of getting into this YouTube thing. I started my first semester of law school just as a way to be able to make videos and to tell people about my experiences and my thoughts, right? That was sort of my mentality for getting into YouTube, and I've just sort of stuck with it. Over time, because I'm a perfectionist, there's a reason I'm a law student right now. I have been continuously trying over and over to figure out how I can push my channel to that next level, right? As I think every content creator does, or every successful content creator. And as I've been doing that research, like there's a lot of small things you can do. You can do set redesign. Look at my room and how redesigned it is. You can improve the quality of your equipment. You can script more or less if you're sort of freelance or whatever. I don't really script. I'm just kind of going off of, what I've thought about before making this video. But there are always ways to improve. And one way which YouTube wants you to improve, so to speak, is that YouTube is particularly fond of specific types of content, right? I've seen a lot of videos talk about the fact that there are usually a handful of classes or archetype videos that YouTube recognizes as being particularly popular, as getting a lot of traction, a lot of views, clicks, and lots of viewership, right? Trying to remember some of the other classes off the top of my head, right? I think that I think cooking was one of them. I think like sports, music is a really big one, right? Like there's a couple categories of videos that YouTube recognizes is so popular as an archetype that it will really push those videos more than other types that people make. And one of these classes is the class of the reaction video, right? We see this a lot. And, nowadays, we see it a lot on BreadTube, especially, right? Just to, the reason why I started making this video, the reason this was brought to my attention, just over within the past week or so, within the past week or so, these are all people who I regularly watch, right? So Sam Collins made a reaction video to trans men. Cat Black made a video reacting to Caitlyn Bennett, which has been talked about by everyone to death. We watched Jamie Dodger made another video reacting to Caitlyn Bennett, because everyone's talking about it right now. I watch a little bit of Vosh and Xanderhall, and yeah, it's very similar. I mean, it's not Caitlyn Bennett, but you have a commentator who is reacting against someone who is clearly wrong and clearly out of their depth. This one being interesting because it has to do with Blair White. I'll talk about this one more in a second in specific. But what I find really interesting about these videos, I mean, I'm not going to say I don't watch them. Of course I do, right? But lately it's just gotten a little taxing on me personally. And the reason it gets taxing is because I see a lot of these videos, usually this is what happens, right? You have a premise, which everyone in your audience already basically agrees with. And what you're essentially doing is making a show sort of blood sports, to put it in such a way, right? Where you are championing their cause and you are tearing down someone who is clearly and ostensibly wrong in whatever they're saying, right? And I get this, and there's sort of a basic appeal of this sort of video, right? It makes us feel like we've won. It makes us feel like we've been vindicated, our identity, especially if it's related to trans issue, that our identity has been validated and that other people have to recognize us, right? I get that appeal, right? And it's probably a big reason why a lot of these people are as popular as they are, right? Why they've gotten their platform, because people like that feeling. It's sort of addicting. I want to use this video to draw attention to that feeling and to just ask ourselves why it feels good, why it feels good to watch these videos, and whether or not there are any issues with it. I mean, I thought about this a lot, right? And really, at the end of the day, I have to ask myself, in this sense, as an audience, as a viewer, how different is this feeling that I'm feeling from someone who watched one of Ben Shapiro's first videos on destroying liberals on a college campus, or destroying transgender students about gender identity, or what have you, right? As far as I'm aware, he really wasn't relevant before he became this sort of gladiator for the young, hip right. And the thing about him is that everyone recognizes that he's wrong, or at least everyone over here on the left. We recognize the faults of his problems, but people love criticizing him and similar people. And for me, maybe this is just me. I don't want to take away from the work that these people are doing. Like, it is good work. Like, it's good to be able to point out why people are wrong. It is good to do that. But I also want to make sure that the discussions that we are having are constructive, right? It's easy enough to go through a video by someone who is far right and like, almost crazy, right? Where they're just saying basically wrong things and just to correct them. It's about as easy as going through and someone says 2 + 2 is 5 and you're like, actually, it's 4, you dumbass piece of shit. Like, it's easy enough to do that, and the scripts write themselves. And I get, as a small content creator, like, it's really tempting to do that sort of content. Like, it's really easy to fall into that trap of thinking that, oh, well, I want my channel to get more traction. This seems to be what everyone wants. Let's just deliver. Like, I get that mentality. I get that both from, like, a strategic standpoint as someone who creates content, and I also get the appeal of that sort of content from a viewer standpoint, right? Like, everyone, at some basic level, like, likes the appeal of this sort of content. But, just like how, the sugar company back in the day really liked selling their sugar and everyone else around them loved eating it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the healthiest thing, right? Eventually people start to realize, actually, maybe we need to like shore up our practices and make sure that we are doing what's best for the people who consume our content. I think one of the best examples, actually, and I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you, Xandra Hall, just for a bit. This isn't meant to be like an overt criticism. This is like a smaller point, but it connects back to the larger discussion, right? In this stream, or in this video, I can't remember if it was specific. I think it was this stream, right? Like this video that was clipped from your stream, like I was watching. You regularly have your stream whenever I'm eating dinner, so sometimes I'll tune in and watch you. And there was a point where, can I find it? Actually, out of curiosity, there was a point. I'm not sure if it is in here. There was a point during either this stream or another. I'm pretty sure it's this stream because like the thumbnail that you use for this video, you actually go on stream and you ask the audience if, like, you've already created the thumbnail, right? Like, you have gone out of your way to, before the stream is over, like, before you had the stream in the first place, you have already created the thumbnail. This one, right here. Like, and I'm pretty sure that, like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is, like, what you showed on the stream was exactly what you ended up using. And this just makes me a little worried, and I'll explain why, right? The idea of criticizing someone is that when you view the idea is that, like, to be academically honest, when you view someone else's content with a skeptic eye, you haven't really drawn any hard conclusions about what they're going to say already, right? You want to go in without any pre-made judgments about what they're going to say. Now, granted, the logical counter to that is, okay, Riley, but here, we're talking about Blair White, right? Like, everyone knows that, her views on trans people. Like, we know that she's a toxic and terrible person. Like, we know that. And I get that. And that's why this is not, like, an overt criticism. I don't think that there's anything, like, any necessary, like, any severe detriment here. Like, I don't think that there really is. And so that's why this is just, like, I think this is more like a minor criticism, just, to watch out for in the future. The problem here is that what you did is that you did presuppose the conclusion before you began watching her video, before you began reacting to it. And what that tells us as an audience is that you already know what you're going to be arguing. You already know what you're going to be saying, and you already know what your judgment of her opinions are as a content creator. And the reason why this is problematic is because now, we aren't even able to pretend like you're just, having an unbiased and like a clean reaction to someone else's content, right? And if you already know what you think going in and the audience already knows what we think going in, then really, what's the purpose of the content? And it seems like the purpose is really just to shit on Blair. And again, like, I get that people want that. Like, people love blood sports. People want to see this person taken down because she's a toxic person. And I get that. But the question is whether or not that's healthy. Let's suppose a hypothetical. Let's say, and again, this is going to assume a lot on Blair's side, right? But let's assume that instead of talking about, I think in that video, she shat on trans people in a Facebook group talking about, like, periods, right? And yeah, like, she said a lot of really stupid stuff. I think we're all able to get behind it. Let's say that Blair, acting in good faith, which again is another hard assumption, it's a heavy one, but let's say that Blair in good faith talks about something that's a little more gray. Let's say that Blair instead talks about the distinction between the terms transgender and transsexual. This is something which I've been doing a little bit of research of my own, sort of in the background. I thought originally I was going to make a video dedicated to it, but it seems like something relevant to bring up here, just as sort of a side note. So recently, obviously, I originally approached this issue. Like, I've seen a lot more people talk about the term transsexual. That's driven a lot of conversation on, like, Twitter, on social media. And my position going in was, as a lot of people's are, and I'm not saying it's necessarily, like, my position has not changed, but as it went in, my position was that transgender is probably the best term that we as a community want to use to describe trans people, and that when people use the term transsexual, what that is doing is that it is implicitly, it is implying that you identify as something different to transgender people, and that you may see yourself as a more valid trans person, likely because of ascribing to, ideas related to, like, trans medicalism, binary genders, and all that, right? Like, that was sort of my understanding going in. And so what I did with that, because, like, I didn't know as much about the distinction, like, I had not spoken to people who do use the term transsexual, and so I went on to Reddit and I made a post, and I was just like, hey, like, can some people explain to me, like, if you do use this term, why you use it, with the current, with culture where it is. And my expectation was to get back some nasty responses, but it actually, while I'm not sure if I agree with the responses I got, they showed a lot more thoughtfulness behind them than what I anticipated going in, right? Essentially, the arguments that I saw, or the rationales rather, I don't want to make this sound like it was anything competitive, it was just a collaborative learning experience. What I got out of it was that people who use that term use it because they felt it better reflected their experience, especially as binary trans people, and that they recognized that there was, this culture where, people could sometimes construe it as being anti-trans, but they absolutely didn't mean it that way. And that really, some people even saw it as sort of like a sublet term of transgender. Like, there's an overarching umbrella of transgender, and then transsexual is like something underneath that to describe binary trans people. Now, that's the argument or the rationale. I'm not sure how much I ascribe to it, and I'm not trying to persuade you on its merits. Like, that's not why I'm recounting it. But the reason I'm recounting it is because it is more rational. Like, it's more reasonable than just, oh, because I want to distance myself from non-binary people, from trans trenders, heavy quotes, right? Like, it's more sophisticated and reflective. And I think that's a bit more meritable. And so to me, it makes this area a lot more gray. And so returning to the hypothetical, let's say that Blair makes a good faith effort to make a video talking about her experience as transsexual versus transgender. Now, returning to you, Xander Hall, right? if you had made your clip, if you had made your thumbnail the way that you did, saying Blair is wrong, trans women are women, if you made that and you went into that video with already sort of that mentality in your head, I'm not sure if you would have given that video fair treatment, right? Because you would have already presupposed the conclusion, which I'm not sure is as clear cut in that situation. Now, again, I'll say it just for clarifying, just so that you don't misunderstand what I'm saying. That didn't really seem to be an issue here, practically speaking. Like, you know, it didn't end up really being that big of an issue because, yeah, Blair made some terrible arguments and comments in the video that you were critiquing, so it ended up being just fine. But this is just something that I want a lot of us to be wary of. I think it's really easy right now as content creators, and you know, like, I'm feeling this especially, like, I can almost feel YouTube pushing me to make this sort of content because it's what viewers want. The same way that people back in the 50s who loved sugar would get as much of it as possible. Different analogies can probably be made to drugs. And it's tempting to just give in to that. It really is. But what I would like to do, what I would like everyone on this platform, especially the people who are further left and who make this content, what I would like for us to focus on is on making constructive commentary, on making things that teach, you know, at least as a significant aspect. Like, you can have criticism. I'm certainly going to be doing criticism because it seems like it's something that I need to do in order to just have a platform, period. But I just want to make sure that people aren't just going through and being like, actually 2 + 2 isn't 5, it's 4, right? Like, I feel like as a community, we can do a little bit more than that. Because the fact of the matter is, if you return to the hypothetical at the beginning of this video, if we don't do that, then to me, that's the main thing that sets us apart from people who are far right. Because they're making this content too. They're making reaction videos. Like, that's what they do. There's been a whole lot of commentary about, like, the far right critic community. Sean has done similar videos. Actually, I'm pretty sure that Sean did, like, a pretty in-depth one about, like, No Bullshit and all those other people. Sargon of Akkad, or Akkad, or whatever his name is. Right? Like, people have done this comment. Like, people recognize this. But I think it's also good to make sure that we are self-reflective in what we take from that and that we don't fall into the same traps. Earlier, I actually can't remember if I said this, but I've been meaning to sort of hold out on a couple people in BreadTube in particular, who I think would be a really good model for a lot of us to look at going forward. There are a handful of content creators who I adore and who I feel like are really doing a lot of this constructive work. That being Natalie from ContraPoints and also Oliver from PhilosophyTube, right? And then there's also H-Bomber Guy, but like, he's doing his own thing. He's out there. He's doing like video commentary as well, but like sometimes he'll talk about politics, and that's really cool. And there's a couple other, like, I think there's a trans guy with like 7,000 subscribers. What's his name? Corviday, yeah, and similar YouTubers. Like, they're all out there making like really good, very constructive material, right? Like, they address problems in content made by other people, which, you know, is harmful to people on the left, right? And arguably also harmful to society in general. But they also make sure to make a really big part of their platform making constructive comment, teaching the people who watch their videos. And there's not really too much else to say other than I really appreciate the work that they do. And I think it would just be good for us, like me going forward. I'm not sure like how I'm going to implement that. I'm going to be doing a lot of sort of what I've been doing, right? But I at least am going to try my best to, you know, be wary of the things that I've been talking about, right? Not falling into these traps of just getting into blood sports, rather, but making sure that we're teaching people things and that we're not only defending people of minority status and from, you know, disenfranchised parts of society, but also helping others to understand why those people are in the positions that they are, and to be able to educate people on the options available to us to remedy those systematic oppressions. Yeah. I hope that people receive this video constructively. That's all that it is. I really appreciate you as a community. You've had a giant impact on my life, and you're probably going to be a big reason why I go on to do the practices in law and everything that I do from here on out. It's a big reason why I got into the work that I did, especially now that I'm working with an organization. Well, I'm not employed, but I fundraise for this organization here, Free State Justice. I'll have a link down below to them and another nonprofit I've worked with, if you want to donate to them. But they do a lot of really good work, which people on this platform probably appreciate. If you want to donate to me, cool, but definitely consider them first. Thank you for listening, fam. Bye.